Hey guys, this is a market update. A historic week for crypto, to be honest. The ETH ETF, but also a lot of legislation going through regarding crypto, which is really positive for the growth of the industry because speculation doesn't have to be made about where we're going with this stuff anymore. So let's go through how that may affect this cycle because we are nowhere near the peak, in my opinion. A long way to go and a lot of gains to be made. So coming to Bitcoin and Ethereum prices first, obviously with the Ethereum ETF this week, we want to have a look at that. We're just in huge bull markets. There's nothing else to be said. Look at the charts, higher highs, higher lows the whole entire time. All of the FUD and everything you read online, it doesn't matter. Higher highs, higher lows. We've just been making those in the Bitcoin chart. We're around all-time highs and the cycle isn't over. The macro cycle still has to play out. And I think it's really positive for risk assets going forward over the next 12 months. So I think there's a long way to go. Hanging around all-time highs, the next macro push, I think is going to be positive for risk assets. And that takes us into price discovery for Bitcoin. You can see that right here. We're just hanging around all-time highs and Bitcoin ETFs are buying most of the Bitcoin off the market. And then you've got Ethereum with the ETF as well. What are the flows going to be? Is it going to get as much as Bitcoin? It's all irrelevant. It totally doesn't matter. You've got two assets that Wall Street basically doesn't own that are coming onto Wall Street and they're going to be owned in some regard. And so you've gone from 0 to 1. It's that simple. You don't have to overthink it. Again, with ETH, higher highs and higher lows the whole entire time, even despite all the FUD with ETH. And yes, it did underperform Bitcoin. It's got some underperformance there. Usually outperforms towards the tail end of a bull market anyway. So you've got some resistance here around 4K. But I think after we churn through all of that, you know, maybe you get some selling because when the ETF comes on board, we know Bitcoin had some selling there. Again, that's all short-term stuff for most people. I think you just have to be long this stuff. You have to be long an asset that's going from 0 to 1. And it's that simple for me. And we've got a long way left to go in this cycle. So I still think it's, a buy zone for me. If you do trade, check out Bybit. Link down in the description gets you a deposit and trading bonus up to $30,000. You can check the details via the link down below. Why do I think we still have a long way to go in this cycle? Well, if you look at time in terms of previous cycles and also where we are in the macro environment with inflation and central bank policy, all of that over the next 12 months should be conducive to a bull market, right, where prices of assets tend to do quite well. That's it. So I'll try and explain that with data and other information here. So this is the Bitcoin cycle that we're in, and you can see we're around the previous all-time high. Now, if you look at the growth trend of BTC, you essentially have these areas where price gets massively overextended to the upside and the downside. So we've had the downside move, and now we're in the middle of the upside move. An overextended move is up here, right? So I have the halving cycle, which is also every cycle, the macro cycle, the central bank cycle, that would usually be topping out, around 25, 26, somewhere around there, right? So maybe spring next year to autumn next year would usually be a top out of that cycle, right? We're not there yet in time, and the Bitcoin price isn't where you would expect it to be if it carried through as well with normal cycles. What's the evidence to suggest that we wouldn't have a normal cycle? We've got an ETF. It's the best performing ETF ever, right? And you have the macro cycle still yet to turn. I'll go through that later on in this video. So look, it looks like we're about halfway through potentially of this cycle. So I still think a long way to go, right? So when the price gets up here, I don't know where it's going to top out, the time or the price, but that would be, a rough estimate of when it's up here, then we're not bullish for another huge bull market, right? It just can't really happen. But we're not anywhere near that right now still. So I think we're about halfway through this cycle in terms of price and time. And it looks that way as well. We usually consolidate just around the all-time high before breaking out. The breakout will probably be from the Fed when they start to ease a little bit. Even if it's not like it happened in 2020, huge money printing and everything. The risk here that people have is that they think, well, we've done really well, the price will dip down. Why would it dip down? The only reason it dips down is if the economy starts to fall apart, but that would be a dip with money printing on the other side. So they either carry on and the market does okay and the economy does okay and then Bitcoin just continues to rise because it's in its cycle, Or the economy falls apart, you get a short-term dip, and then they print loads of money again. And then, of course, Bitcoin prices that in. So either one of those scenarios, I see Bitcoin moving up towards this top end eventually. So that's why I'm bullish for this cycle, and that's why the price right here, I don't think is very high. You can also see that just fundamentally, Wall Street want to get these assets on board. So again, with the ETH ETF, yeah, you may get some choppy trade around the ETH ETF. People are unlocking, people are using that liquidity to sell out if they're looking to sell out, especially from the ETH the Grayscale Trust. There'll be some sellers from that, sure, just like Bitcoin was. But again, that's an opportunity now, because once that's done, the flows are very clear to see. So Bitcoin holdings since inception for the ETFs, best performing ETF ever, look to be accelerating again after a period of pause. And then right here, you can see that the Bitcoin ETFs, they've added 230,000 Bitcoin since January the 10th. Only 105,000 Bitcoin have been mined since then. That means they've taken all of that supply plus another 125 coins. Right now, you've got some sellers from ETH, E into that, maybe some profit takers and everything. That's fine, but essentially, there is a huge demand for Bitcoin, and there will be demand for ETH as well. We don't know what it's going to be, but these are going from 0 to 1. That is the trade. It's not the day-to-day, is it going to go up or down 20%? The trade is, this is a huge 0 to 1 moment, and you just have to be long, in my opinion. Looking at some other on-chain data as well, it's not telling us that we're really overdone for this cycle. We've had a healthy pullback in the bull market, right? 25% it was. We've kind of recovered as well from that. So what we really have to watch out for is this euphoria stage. So Checkmatey put together this, which is short-term holder MVRV. It's one of my favorite metrics. It really just shows you down here, this is MVRV, right? So when this line gets up to kind of a couple of standard deviations above, that is typical, very, very overbought prices, a huge bull market. When it comes down to standard deviations below, that's typical selling off. Not a bear market because it's a short-term holder, but you can see these areas where the price sells off. So down here, usually oversold, up here, usually overbought. We're not anywhere near that right now. We're trending, right? Quiet trending, short consolidation. So we're nowhere near the euphoria stage. This stage is great. Everyone feels amazing here because you're just huge, huge moves, right? But actually, that's the area to pay attention, because usually after this euphoria stage where MVRV shows us huge, a couple of standard deviations away from the norm, that is usually the end stage of a bull market. And the next stage is price drawdown. That's when we need to pay attention. We're nowhere near that in terms of the price action that we're seeing. So that's why I'm still confident that going ahead, right? You've seen the price in terms of its trend, macro cycle, central bank cycle, none of it's peaking out in dovishness. We've got that to come. This is ultra short term, the VWAP oscillator, just showing us that, yeah, we went to an all-time high, we drew down a bit, a classic pullback in a bull market with a higher low, and we seem to be recovering a bit again. So we could be going into another expansion phase here, although it may rely on some news flow and inflation staying low, which we'll talk about right now, because it actually looks to be. So again, the macro cycle, you can see this right here. The macro cycle is not peaking out. Again, if Bitcoin's at 150K and we're in euphoria zone and the macro cycle, liquidity cycle's up here, it's actually time to get really bearish, because the next phase definitely isn't for another bull market. We've got this ahead of us, in my opinion. This is money supply as well. Went bearish, we're now recovering. So we just go up to normal levels, not even 2020 style, just normal levels. That's a bull market for BTC. I guess the worry for the rest of this cycle is that inflation doesn't play ball and the Fed remains tight. I don't really see that happening, so I want to explain why I'm kind of still bullish for the rest of this cycle. Firstly, there's only a few things that can happen. Inflation stays way too high, the Fed stays high. Okay, that's fine, but the economy isn't crashing in that regard, and Bitcoin doesn't care about 5% interest rates. It cares about how much stimulus there is through fiscal or monetary. There's a lot of that. Bitcoin's doing well, going from 0 to 1, and now ETH as well with the ETF. If they stay high too long and they cause a huge crash, everything's going to crash. Bitcoin's going to crash, crypto, everything else, stock market's going to crash. Then they're going to come in, print money like they always do. Everything goes to a new all-time high again. So there's two options. You either grind higher or you go down and then up like a rocket like we did in 2020. They're the only two options in my opinion. So it's really just like what do you want to be in? Do you want to be in the currency that can only get printed? Or do you want to be in the asset which is going to either go grinding up or way down and way up? They're the kind of only two options. We know that we have to be in assets. They protect us. So be in the best assets. In any case, what I'm seeing from a lot of this data is that core PCE is going to come to around the Fed's target anyway. It's no surprise, core PCE is a gamed metric. It doesn't actually measure inflation. Real inflation is like 10%, right? But core PCE, taking out everything that we actually need to buy, right, around the Fed's target. This may come down towards the end of this year. You can see in 2023 it actually came down. So we may follow that as well. If we look at this as well, this is Morgan Stanley. We expect deceleration ahead with slowdown in monthly pace of core PCE inflation, especially in the second half of this year. If you get these inflation prints coming down, the market's going to love this. Rates are going to start to come down as well. And that's bullish risk assets for sure. If we look at the components as well, core PCE is running at 2.8%, 80 basis points above target, but more than half of that distance is explained by rents inflation. And if you look at rents inflation, it looks to be the forward-looking stuff is looking to be fairly weak, which would eventually come into this as well. So maybe inflation core PCE is running a little bit hot, but given everything that's happened, this isn't a disaster. Now, if a disaster happens with unemployment, a bank goes bankrupt, look, it's going to be pretty shady for, that period of time. Bitcoin will definitely get sold off. But the reaction is they print more money. They did it with the banking crisis, Silicon Valley signature, right? The BTFP, the Bank Term Funding Program, printed money through the back door, and that's kicked off this bull run. If it happens again, it'll be even bigger. So you're either in the currency that's going to get destroyed either way, or you're in the, the strong asset that goes down, up, or grind up. That's really the only two options, right? And we have the specific story of crypto as well with this 0 to 1 on Wall Street. So higher highs and higher lows for BTC and ETH, right? So pick your battles. If you are a trader, check out the 30K deposit bonus to Bybit down in the description. The crypto investor course, I'll link down there as well. You've got private Discord groups in there and 300 videos on getting set up. I'm James, this is MyZG. Cheers for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.